Good evening and welcome to GRS Round 5. This is F1 and we are at the home of motor racing at Silverstone in the lovely British summer, as you can see by the fact our guys are now pulling out of the pits on the intermediate tyres. We had the F2 race yesterday with no rain, so it was, I think, pretty much guaranteed we were going to get some here today. As well as being round 5 of the season, it is also the next level of the fight between Mercedes and McLaren for that Constructors' title, with Luke and Carol in the Mercedes and Johnny and Matthias in the McLarens, all hoping to take as many points as possible from this, the first sprint weekend for GRS. So as well as having the normal short qualifying and 50% race, which around Silverstone is 26 laps, we're also going to have a 9-lap sprint race sandwiched in between, which is going to set the grid for that feature race. We also have a couple of new drivers today, just to keep you all up to date with. So moving up as a reserve from PCF2, we have yesterday's second place finisher Hugo Nelson, who's been promoted by his Alpine team to fill in that seat today. Thank you very much, Hugo. We also have Kevin Kovacs, who is going to be the first guy on a flying lap, so I think it makes sense to ride on board with him. Promoted full-time to AlphaTauri here in F1 after showing some great pace down in F2. And we also have a couple of new drivers of Uros Lazic, who will be driving the Haas, and Jari Pujem in the other Alpine. So a few new drivers on the grid just to show their mettle against the top tier of GRS here. So Ken's just on his first lap, we were on those intermediate tyres, kind of having to fight the car a little bit as he makes his way through the loop and onto the Wellington Straight through the little flick of entry, which is a complete nothing in the dry, but does require a little catch of the car there in these slippery, tricky conditions. That would ordinarily be a DRS straight down there, but no DRS in these conditions as he drops it into Brooklands. And then the tricky corner of the field, they just need to go on and on and on. You want to get on the power way earlier than you actually can without losing the car. For the run here through Woodcote and down the old pit straight, a scene of let's say a controversial moment last season in real F1 as a flick through cops. Again, Kevin fighting the car to not completely lose the rear as we drop into Maggots and Beckett's down in 6th gear, where ordinarily you would be up in 7th and 8th. Even dropping to 4th for the second part of Beckett's there. And then the run through Chapel and onto what would be the second DRS zone of the Hangar Straight, for the run down the tricky corner, the deceptively tricky corner of Stowe, where you want to bleed off as little speed as possible, but still make sure you get the nose in. Easy to run wide there on the exit and invalidate your lap or pick up penalties in the race. Kevin does well to keep it within track limits for the little flick through the Vale chicane, slowest part of the circuit, and then through Club Corner as we see the Alpine spinning in front, and Kevin does a 140.5. Followed by a 37.9 for Johnny, and the second McLaren of Matthias coming up to the line with a 38.2. So McLaren setting the early pace as we've now got the Ferrari of Antonio coming to finish his lap, and he splits them with a 37.9. So just 300 slower than Johnny. That's a good starting lap. Ferrari not having the best season so far, so Antonio will be hoping for a good result here along with Jacob, his teammate. As last year's champion in the Red Bull, Jelly Easink, puts it P4 for now with 38.4, so he's about half a second off. But there's always going to be time to find in a wet qualifying session. Get a couple little less snaps, or maybe just manage to be a little more aggressive on the power in certain points once you've found where the grip is. And of course, the qualifying may dry out. It's pretty cloudy, but the rain's not overly heavy, so we could even see a couple of guys chancing it on the dry tyres towards the end of the session, which will make all of these times completely irrelevant, as we'll see guys around about 10 seconds a lap faster. As Jelly's had a moment on the exit of Luffield, going for another quick one, I think, but manages to keep it out of the wall. As Mercedes turn up to the party with Carroll going currently fastest on a 36.1. So he's a full 1.8 seconds quicker than anybody else. As Luke, his teammate, comes over the line. P7 for now, a 38.8. So there's that little tight midfield fight, and then just Carroll, who's essentially put in a worldie of a lap and just absolutely blitzed everyone. Matthias did a second flyer, goes a little faster, so he's a 10th quicker than Johnny now. And I think Johnny's probably bailed the lap because he's a few seconds down, and he was ahead of Carroll on track. So Johnny may be doing a recharge and then going again, yeah. So the McLaren just starting a second flyer, so they're staying on these intermediate tyres. They don't wear very quickly, so you can get a few flyers in, maybe with just a cooldown lap here and there to recharge the battery. As Anson Wong goes P2 with a 37.7. He's still not in the same postcode as Carroll, but it's a good lap there for the Aston Martin. Aston Martin's not had a great start to the season either, so they'll be looking at gaining some more points, hopefully catching up to the guys ahead in that midfield constructors fight. Maybe even getting in amongst McLaren and Mercedes if they have some issues right up at the front. In pretty much kind of a titanic battle that they've been having so far this season. Just round about a 10-point gap between the teams after 4 races, so the extra points available here for the sprint race could make a big difference to the constructors. Who's that coming up to the line? One of the AlphaTauris, that is Dino, who's on a second flyer and slightly improving as he gets a big snap and unfortunately invalidates the lap at Club Corner. What would have been a 39.0, a big improvement. I'm not sure cutting the inside is going to invalidate his next lap as well, but it might have done because the track's still red, so I think it unfortunately has. So I think we'll see Dino heading back to the pits, which is unfortunate for the Croatian driver. Not able to improve on his current 16th position, so we'll be looking for a big chunk of time. But if he can find a couple of seconds, that's going to put him P3. Even though if we completely ignore Carroll and his different planet 36.1 that he's managed to put in. Quite a busy qualifying, as it generally is in conditions like this. You never know when the rain does very slightly ease off. But it is important to know you are on track at the moment when it is the quickest. The tyre wear, as I said, not that impactful. The main detriment to your lap time is carrying the additional fuel to do that. But if you can find a slightly drier bit of track, that could be worth as much as 3 or 4 seconds on its own. So the couple of tenths you lose from carrying an extra few laps isn't going to make too much of a difference compared to just not being on the track at the right time. And I have to say, the rain seems to be getting a little lighter, as the Alpine has a bit of a moment in front of Carroll and nearly bins it. As Mitchell in the Williams has managed to put a time in good enough for P2. I missed that, unfortunately. But that is a 37.5 from the Williams driver. Mitchell has been in and around fighting with the Mercedes and the McLaren boys, and will be hoping to do so again today. He's had some pretty bad luck early on in the season. He was comfortably leading Australia before a safety car bug disqualified him, as Carroll unfortunately invalidates his lap at Chapel despite being a 10th up, so there won't be an improvement this time around from the Mercedes driver. Currently provisional pole position with about 8 minutes of the session left to run. So we might see Carroll dive into the pits here. Get some new boots, get some more fuel, take advantage of the fact you don't get a penalty for speeding into the pit lane during qualifying, and see how he can do next time around on some fresh tyres. If it's dried up slightly, those fresh tyres are going to be extremely powerful. As just 2 guys yet to set a time, which is Jan Nadir, the second Williams, after Mitch is currently P3. Antonio managed to jump him in the Ferrari, so we've got a Mercedes and a Ferrari on the front row at Silverstone currently, which has happened a few times in the past during the Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari days. So we'll see if one of the Williams can have an impact on that. I've had a Williams on the front row at Silverstone for around about 20 years, so Jan just with a 41.1, so probably some errors there in that lap, just trying to get to grips with the track and with the tricky conditions. Very slippery. It's going to almost be like someone's got oil on the track, as opposed to it being fully wet and you just have to be very careful everywhere. You want to really push it, especially with it being in qualifying. But you know, doing so, you're likely to lose the car and lose more time than you gain. So last man yet to set a time. Unfortunately, new driver Uros Lazic has retired from the session, but PCF2 driver Hugo is on a lap just coming down the hangar straight right now. on the way into Stowe. Managed to take P2 in yesterday's race after strong qualifying, a strong sprint race, and of course a strong main race in a three-way fight for the win that turned into a two-way fight after a mistake. And unfortunately lost out on that fight, so we'll be hoping to maybe match that result today. But time's just good enough for P16 on a 38.9, but that's only a tenth behind Luke, who is leading the drivers, so he's not too far away. It's just some of these drivers obviously probably done a bit more practice, have a bit more knowledge with the wet. Maybe they're running some wet setups. Could be dry weather for the race, so guys not wanting to compromise their race pace. Maybe we've got a bit of a divide between quali and race focus. As one of the Red Bulls just gets out of Luke's way as he's setting off on a new lap in the Mercedes. As the Yaris jumped up to P2 in the Alpine, new driver. So is the track getting drier, or is that just his normal pace? We have no idea because we've never seen him drive before. So unfortunately for Antonio, that is going to get that Ferrari off the front row unless he can find some more time. We'll have to see if Luke can get anywhere close to his teammate as he's making his way around Love Field, this long right-handed 180-degree corner. Has to wait an age, it seems, to get on the power. Runs through Woodcut down the old pit straight for the flick round Cops. Keeps it in 7th gear. Careful not to run wide. Has to just wait on getting the power down to not just understeer the car straight off the track. And then rides the curbs nicely through Maggots. Runs a little wide through the second part of Beckett's, and again he's going to be very hesitant on the power to get through Chapel and onto the Hangar Straight, but he's going to pick up a little bit of a tow here from his teammates, so that's some good orchestration there from the Mercedes boys. As Carroll nicely dives out of the way as Luke runs it through Stowe. Hard on the brakes down into the Vale chicane. And just club corner after he negotiates this. Very careful here on the power. Traction can be a little tricky even in the dry, so got to be especially careful in the wet. And it's a 38.0 for Luke. So it's nowhere near Carroll, but it's a pretty good improvement, and it puts him in the top 10. And we might be seeing a little bit of a return of the favour here. Luke's staying in front of Carroll for now. Maybe he's going to give him a bit of a tow here down the Wellington Straight. The tow can be very powerful in the wet, especially if you put some more front wing on your car just to help it get that bite into the corners in the conditions. And looks like Luke is going to give Carroll a tow here. Hopefully he'll get out of the way before they get down to Brooklands. And that's some good teamwork from Mercedes. That explains why they're leading the constructors right now. Working well as a unit, as unfortunately Yari's retired. I'm not sure if that was in the pits or if he did it on track. But that 37.1 he currently has in P2 is not going to be improved, so he'll have to hope that it doesn't dry out and nobody can better that and take that front row start for Alpine. As Carroll has a bit of a moment running through Cops as Dino jumps up to P4, so he's found a great lap there in the AlphaTauri. I'm not entirely sure where that came from because he was a fair distance off the pace as Johnny goes up to P2 with a 36.7. So is the track drying out? Is the track getting faster? Carroll's 4 tenths up through the Sector 2 split. So I feel like it might be because it's not being a perfect lap so far, but it's been good enough to be 4 tenths up on his time that was already clear of the field. This is going to be somewhere within the 135s from Carroll if he keeps it clean here. Through the Vale chicane and through Club Corner. And he's just a bit hesitant on the power, but you have to be through there, and it's a 35.6. So as soon as anybody gets close to that bar he set, he just moves it another few markers up. And another half a second found there just to bridge that gap down to Johnny, back up to a second. As I think everybody's pretty much is going to be out on track at this point. We see everybody either out or on their way out. Only drivers currently showing us in the pits, or just exiting the pit lane, I believe. Carroll's not quite got that right. Find somebody else on a lap. It's a Ferrari at the head of the queue. That would be Jacob Gutcher, who's just on an out lap. So the car behind would be the Haas of Evan Bowers, who made his debut in Miami and had an extremely good race there. Evan's just a 10th down on his time, but there is going to be time to find in this last sector, I think. If it's drying out a little bit, especially as the second Ferrari of Antonio has unfortunately crashed out as well. So he's not going to be improving from P5 as Evan's going to pit. So Evan's calling it a day for his qualifying. As Johnny's going to come round Stowe, just about to start a lap. He's done one in the middle and he's going to go again. So I think next man to the line is going to be Kevin in the AlphaTauri, but I think he's backed off this and will be starting a lap again, possibly. Seemed very hesitant through the Vale chicane. But he does jump up to P8 with a 37.6, so still finds half a second. There's definitely more time in that last little complex of corners with Vale and Club, so he'll be hoping he can find that. As Dino's going to be way off the line. Anson's just starting a lap in the Aston Martin. Luke's just finished a lap with a 37.6 to put himself at P10. So a slight improvement there from the championship leader right now. And he'll be hoping he can maybe find some more time on what is I think going to be his last lap here. There's just 1 minute and 4 left. I'm not sure he's going to have time to get around and start another one, so this one's going to have to count. But at the head of this train, everyone's just starting a lap now, is Jacob Gurcher, just on his way through Copse, the Ferrari driver. He's on a decent lap at the moment, it seems. He's currently sat in P14, so he'll be looking for more places to give himself a better starting position for the sprint. Maybe keep out of some of the chaos that's likely to unfurl through Abbey Farm and Village at the start of that. He's a couple of tenths up. A couple of tenths, he's going to jump him over Matthias right now. If he can find another couple, it could put him in that bottom half of the top 10 around Dino and Mitchell. It's very, very tight in there. Just half a second separating 6th and 14th. So Jacob can find that half a second. That's going to really elevate him quite high up the grid. As he gets a big moment through Club, and that's going to cost him some time, but still finds 2 tenths. So he still goes up 1 place, gets ahead of Matthias into 13th, but unfortunately he doesn't find any more than that. As next across the line is going to be one of the Aston Martins, which would be Anson, who's spun it on Club, so he's had a big moment there. And that's going to completely ruin that lap. Whether it was going to be an improvement, I'm not sure. As Luke does go faster. Luke gets even faster with 37.4. So that a Mercedes improving up to 6th place. Next over the line is the other Aston Martin of Nitsanahana, who finds a couple of tenths. 38.4, so that's going to leave him 16th, unfortunately. But finding times are always good. Next man over the line is going to be one of the Williams. That's going to be Mitchell, who goes P9, who finds a 10th. So then it's going to be the McLaren of Matthias Posch, who jumps all the way up to P3, closely followed by Carroll, just moving that bar down a little bit further to a 35.6. So the Mercedes driver takes pole by a second, ahead of the 2 McLarens. Johnny ahead of Matthias, 3 tenths the gap between them. And a gap back to Jari Priem in the Alpine. So good first qualifying from the new Alpine driver. Last year's champion, Yeli, he puts it 5th in the Red Bull. So decent start to his title defence after not the best race last week for Jelly. And let's just see. I believe it was Owen next in the Alfa Romeo. So Owen managed to get P6 there in the Alfa Romeo. Luke in the second Mercedes P7. With newly promoted driver Kevin. Antonio Cortez lead Ferrari in P9 with Mitchell Merckx down in P10 for Williams. So disappointing qualifying from Mitchell. We'll be hoping to improve in the race and in the sprint, of course, that's coming up next. Dino Pushkadir takes P11 with Anson Wong. Joining him on the 6th row, the AlphaTauri and Aston Martin drivers. Evan Bowers at P13. Jacob Gurcher in the second Ferrari P14 with Hugo Nelson and Nitsanahana on row 8. And Alfie Harvey and Jan Nadir on row 9. And Uros Lazic is P19 for the sprint. So he's going to start the sprint at back, but he's going to have 9 laps to try and make up some places before we start the race proper. So for those of you not aware of the sprint rules, we are using the real F1 rules. So it's going to be around about 30% the length of a normal race. We use 50% races here, obviously. So it's going to be half the length of a normal Silverstone sprint race, which is 9 laps. You do not have to make a pit stop. You can start on any tyres you want. The softs will just about make it, but you're going to be kind of crawling around at the end. I expect most drivers to go on the mediums. Maybe some guys near the back will take the softs, take that gamble. Try and find some places early and then hold on to them at the end. And safety cars and things of that nature are the same, and the points work. If you win the sprint, you get 8 points. If you are second, you get 7, and it works all the way down like that until 8th place, who picks up a single point. As the lights are coming on for the start of this F1 sprint here. 5 lights. And lights out, and away we go. And again, it's a Mercedes against McLaren at the front. And Carroll gets a great start, and Johnny just has to slot in behind for the run through the first few corners. Owens managed to jump Jelly and get himself up into the P4. Dutch drivers, they're swapping position. And he's going to be taking a look at Matthias, see if he can maybe take 3rd place off the McLaren. We've got some guys moving around at the back. Luke's dropped all the way to 11th place. So not a great start from the second Mercedes, as we see a Williams running very far off track. I think that's Mitchell, currently down in P8. So he'll be hoping that's the first time he does that. As Jan has unfortunately somehow already retired from the race. But there is no safety car or VSC, so we're not going to bring this to an end. Just see the drivers all filtering down the old pit straight and through Copse. Carroll leads by a second from the 2 McLarens, Johnny ahead of Matthias. And then Owen and Jelly leading Jari Priem in that Alpine. We are hoping to make up some places here if he can. Kevin Kovacs P7 ahead of Mitchell, who's coming under pressure from Kevin's teammate Dino here down the hangar straight. But Mitchell gets a great exit out of Chapel, and he's going to get on the back of Kevin. And he's going to make up the places. We've got a Ferrari and a Haas off. There's a Ferrari of Jacobs off into the wall, and the Haas of Evan Bowers is missing a tyre. And he's going to be out, and that's a virtual full safety car. It's upgraded to a full safety car, so we've lost 2 drivers already. Contact down the hangar straight between a Ferrari and a Haas. And Jacob just about gets away with that. The car's got damage, but he's going to be able to pit here and just come back on at the back. Unfortunate for Evan that he's going to take no further part in this sprint, and he will start the full race in 18th place. So his teammate started this one at the back. Euros already made himself way up to 15th in the Haas, and his teammate is going to replace him essentially at the base of the field. We'll get to the race proper. But this is going to erode that 1 second lead that Carroll had managed to build over the McLarens at the front as he's being picked up by the safety car. But Carroll's actually on the soft tyres, so that explains why he got off the line like a rocket ship and managed to make up so much time at the beginning lap. The only other driver who has chosen those soft tyres is Dino Pushkadir in the AlphaTauri, as seems to be a little bit of position swapping on the safety car. I wonder if that's just guys underestimating just how slowly this thing goes. Although Matthias has dropped to 5th, and we seem to be having a little bit of a traffic jam on the old pit straight. I wonder if someone's gone AI mode and it's teleported people. Yeah, don't go AI mode under safety car, guys. It teleports you. So some 5-second penalties getting picked up. That is going to be very unfortunate for the drivers that have got those. They'll have to investigate that. But unfortunately, there is no time to do full stewarding between the sprint and the full race. So those penalties will unfortunately negatively impact the grid position for the race, but they can get removed in order to award proper points for this sprint if you do manage to land in the top 8, or if without that penalty you would have landed within the top 8. So points will be put right. There's unfortunately not a lot we can do about the grid. But yeah, don't go AI mode under safety car, guys, because it teleports you, and that's a really bad thing to do. As we've got a guy diving off into the pits. I think that's Hugo. Yeah, so Hugo in the Alpine is diving into the pits. Weird time to make a stop. Doesn't have a 5-second penalty himself, so he's not going in to serve that and take the hit to track position. So I wonder if he's going to go soft tyres here. He is. Soft tyres for the Alpine. Oh, he did have a 5-second penalty. My mistake. So yeah, Hugo's going to serve that 5 seconds, get it off the books, get some soft tyres on, and take off after everybody else. And soft tyres for the Aston Martin of Nitsanahana as well. So these two guys are going to be pretty rapid at the back. And the likes of Jacob and Alfie up in front of them are going to have to really keep an eye on their mirrors to not, unfortunately, cause contact with these guys, because they're going to be extremely quick off the restart and looking to make up places as soon as possible. But I think safety car is likely to be in this lap. Those two guys should have no problems getting on the back. Safety car is pretty slow around places like Luffield and Copse. So shouldn't be a problem for the Alpine and Aston Martin to get on the back of the train here and get us a restart once the safety car has finished filtering through Maggots and Beckett's and Chapel, as it calls itself in at the start of Sector 3, which is just after the little left-handed kink of Chapel. But sprint race here is dry. Okay, and now the safety car's teleported backwards. What is going on? Safety car's teleporting backwards, which is weird. Is it telling people to overtake? It seems it's telling people to overtake. So we might get another lap or two of this. There's a 5-second penalty for Kevin for the same deal with ignoring yellow flags. And Jelly picks up a time penalty for corner cutting. Under safety car. Yeah. So I guess Bert's been going AI mode and it's been tagging him out as well, unfortunately. But everyone's going to tear off here, try and catch back up to the safety car. It's kind of sat there on the hanger straight. As we've got, is that Dino diving in? I think that's Dino diving in the pits, and he gets a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So penalties galore here in the F1 sprint. After a deserved safety car. At least it wasn't a phantom safety car that's caused all this. It definitely did need to be a safety car for the collision on the hanger straight. Bits of Ferrari and Haas all over the place. As... Oh. Seems to have booted me out of the session. Can you still hear me, Nathan? Because it's yeeted me out of the lobby. So I think what's likely happened is the host tabbed out. Okay, so it booted me out of the lobby. I think what's probably happened with all this is some people have been tabbing out and pausing, and that's caused some issues. So we're going to restart the sprint race. So that kind of solves all of this. Allow me to go and find the grid from the stream. Just so we can get this all sorted out as quickly as possible and get going again. I think I'm going to take 5 minutes and just rest my voice. Because I might need it for this. As possible and get going again. I think I'm going to take 5 minutes and just rest my voice. I might need it for the... So I'll stick back. He's going to have for Williams, so at this point qualifying from midship. into the race upper. But this is going to erode that 1 second lead that Carroll had managed to build over the McLarens at the front. He's been put up with the safety car, but Carroll's actually on the soft tyres. So that explains why he got off the line like a rocket ship and managed to make up so much time at the beginning lap. The only other driver who has chosen those soft tyres is Dino Chia. And welcome back. Sorry for the technical difficulties with, EA servers. This one wasn't even our fault, which makes a nice change. So the drivers just reselecting tyres and strategies and the like. We have enforced the same tyres as they used in the original start of the sprint race. So we will see Carol and Dino choosing those soft tyres. It'll be interesting to see what Will Coates in the second Red Bull, who has now managed to make it, unfortunately missed qualifying due to working slightly late today. But we'll be on the grid starting P20 as the lights are now coming on, and that's 5 lights and lights out, and away we go. And we'll see if Carroll can get a start just as good as he got last time. Owen gets a great start again and jumps up to P4 once more in the Alfa Romeo, as Carroll's tearing off at the front on those soft tyres again. We've got another crash at the back. This time it's the Ferrari of Jacob Gutcher involved yet again, but he seems to have happened on his own. So Ferrari pointing the wrong way through farm, but nobody else involved in that, and all 20 cars still going as we make our way onto the Wellington Straight. Carroll's already built out a 1.1 second lead, and we've got 3 wide behind, with Owen making a move on Matthias and making his way up into P3. So a great start this time around for the Alfa Romeo driver, now splitting those McLarens as Johnny's going to try and take off the Carroll. But whether that gap quick enough to take advantage of some DRS later in the race, we'll have to wait and see, as we've got quite a lot of fighting going on as the guys run down into Copse, and we've got some cars around at the back, and that is Luke Mills and Evan Bowers in the Mercedes and the Haas drivers, fortunately facing the wrong direction on the exit of Copse. So we've had some contact there as Jacob manages to sneak through, get his way up into 18th position. As I think Evan had to give the place back to Luke, so that's going to drop the Haas driver right down to the back, but back up towards the front. Owen just about holding off Matthias. Has to take a slightly weird line through the Vale chicane, but manages to maintain P3 for now in the Alfa Romeo. But it's going to be kind of like swarming around behind him with Matthias and Giari all over the back of that Ferrari-powered car. We'll be hoping he's got the straight line speed in his setup to keep them at bay, at least until DRS opens, because he's dropped 2 seconds off the back of Johnny, running in P2, who's pretty much bridged that gap to Carroll, made a big advantage for the Mercedes off the line on the first lap, having those soft tyres on, as Evan's gone around again at the back, unfortunately, so that's going to drop the Haas way off the back of the field. But that advantage from the soft tyres seems to have been diminished quite a bit. Johnny's definitely managing to bridge that gap at just around 1.2, 1.3 seconds. So it doesn't have to gain all that much to get in the DRS when it opens next time around. As we've got about an 8-way fight here over 3rd place, with Owen in the Alfa Romeo, followed by Matthias, Yari, Antonio, Mitcha, Dino and Kevin. Anson's just about hanging on to the back in the Aston Martin, currently down in P10. So this could get a little bit tasty when the DRS opens up, as Matthias is going to look for a move on the exit of Chapel down the Hangar Straight, but Owen just seems to have a slightly more in a straight line, but Matthias is going to get to the inside for Stowe, and he's going to dive down and re-establish McLaren in 2nd and 3rd, but Owen's going to fight this all the way, and they're going to side by side into Vale. Matthias brakes slightly later, can run a slightly wider line through the first part of Vale. That might give Owen a better exit, and maybe he's going to get a run here into Sector 1. Down the Hamilton Straight they come, as Johnny sets a new fastest lap, so he is reeling Carroll in at the front. That might get a bit spicy in a lap or two, but we'll stay on board with this fight over 3rd place, as Matthias has managed to hold his position through that first sector. But we're going to come onto the Wellington Straight now, and the first dose of DRS for all of these guys behind Matthias. Matthias gets a great exit out of the loop, and that's going to help him stay ahead, as everyone behind him, Owen and Yari and Antonio, are all going to have that rear wing open, get the straight line speed advantage, and they're going to close back in to less than half a second behind. But Matthias just seems to have way more grip and better traction as they run through Brooklands and Luffield and onto the old pit straight through the Kincut Woodcut. Will anybody try a slightly suicidal move into Copse? I don't think anybody's quite that stupid, and they all sit nicely in line. A little bit wide there from Yari on the exit of Copse, and that might have given him a warning. A 3-second penalty. He's going to be lethal in a race as short as this. So these drivers need to be very careful with track limits to not extend anywhere and get those penalties. Owen's just about going to stick within the DRS range of Matthias, currently about 9 seconds back, 9/10 back as we speak of 3-second penalties. Jacob gets one at the back in the Ferrari, so that's going to put paid to him gaining too many places or any points unless something seriously weird kicks off. Owen just about hanging within the DRS range of Matthias up in 3rd place, and that allows him to maintain 4th ahead of all the guys behind him. Owen got a great start, but his pace seems to have dropped off slightly here, and we're going to have a big train of 6 cars still running through as we get on to lap 4, reaching almost the halfway point. Carroll and Johnny just managing that gap at the front, about 1.3 seconds. So the Mercedes currently leading the McLaren. Carrying on as they started the race. This will set the grid for the feature race. If it stays like this, we'll have a repeat of the front row. As looks like someone going for a move just there in the back. Mitchell had a look at Antonio, I believe, but doesn't get anywhere with it. Not able to make the place up as Evans unfortunately had another spin through Sector 1 and now retired from the race. So seems a pretty big crash the Haas driver has had, unfortunately. But Matthias has managed to bridge a gap to Owen, so he's got a 1.3 second lead over the Alfa Romeo in 4th place. And that's going to keep him safe. He's not going to be under threat from DRS as Owen picks up a 3-second time penalty, and that's going to be a big problem. If Owen drops 3 seconds from where he is now, that's going to take him outside the sprint points and down towards the bottom of the top 10. And he's not going to have the DRS to defend with, so he's going to come under pressure here from Jari Priem. Jari thought about a move around the outside of Stowe, but you've got to be very brave to try around there. Decides just to sit behind for now with his Alpine. He's going to get another dose of DRS once they get through these kinks in Sector 1 and get onto the Wellington Straight. But Jari's gone around. Jari's spun. And that's going to drop him down to 12th, maybe 13th. He might lose out to Alfie as well here. Just about managed to stay in front with Alfie and right behind him. So that's going to drop him down to 12th. That's going to be outside the sprint points. And he's not going to have time to game back up, even if he does have pace. So that's going to protect Owen from one more place he would have lost with this penalty. And he may actually steal a point here if he can get a bit of a wriggle on and build 3 seconds over the Aston Martins, who are currently running in 9th and 10th. But he's got not quite a second, about 7/10 ahead of Antonio, just to hold that P4. And Dino gets a 3-second penalty as well. So that's going to drop the AlphaTauri down a long way as well. There's going to be a huge amount of places dropped just with a single 3-second time penalty in a race as short as this, with the field so closely bunched. DRS extremely powerful around Silverstone, as Mitchell gets one as well. So that's 4th, 6th and 7th all getting 3-second time penalties. This is a dream for Antonio in that Ferrari. He's basically just been gifted 4th place, and which is going to be 5 points, which is pretty good. Especially considering he's not really going to have to do any work for it here, as long as he doesn't bin the car or somehow get overtaken by Kevin, who's 3 guys back. It's going to be a free 4th place for Antonio, but he still wants to try and make a move on Owen. See if he can find a gap to squeeze past the Alfa Romeo. Although there is quite a big gap in front of Owen, I think it's unlikely he's going to close up sufficiently to get onto Matthias. You never know once he gets released. Maybe he's got some pace just sat in that Ferrari of his and can really put it to good use. Just to check in with our leaders, with Carroll and Johnny. Still around about a 1.4 second gap between them. That's just stretching out to a 1.5 seconds. So Carroll's looking after those tyres pretty well. He's on around 40% ERS. Let's see what Johnny's on. Johnny's spent quite a bit. So Johnny's down at about 25%, so he's not going to have the ERS advantage to close in once Carroll's tyres do start to drop off a little bit. They won't lose all that much pace. So Johnny's going to have to find some from somewhere if he wants to make a move and take the victory here in the F1 sprint. But back to this fight for 4th place with Owen, Antonio, Mitchell, Dino and Kevin, all still within the DRS, all still running in a nice little train as they flick through Maggots and Beckett's. Owen may have just about built a big enough gap through there to Antonio to protect himself here down the Hangar Straight as he's deploying the last of his Barry, but Antonio's tapped as well. Both down in single figures as Jari picks up a 3-second time penalty, which is going to drop him below Alfie and Yelly at least. Maybe below Hugo as well, as Antonio's going to try it down the inside of Vale. Owen breaks a little later and he's been slight contact, and Owen loses the rear, and that's going to allow Mitchell and Dino to sneak through. That's going to drop Owen down to P7 in that Alfa Romeo. But now he's going to have the DRS to maybe attack people. With Owen, Dino, and Mitchell all having 3-second time penalties, this is a straight fight between them to land somewhere on the grid. It's kind of like qualifying with grid penalties. It's still a straight fight between you to see where you end up. You're just not really fighting anybody else. But Antonio, even though there was that little bit of contact with Owen, didn't lose too much time. He's still going to have a 6/10 advantage back to the Williams of Mitchell. And he's going to be able to hold on to this 4th place. It doesn't matter if these 3 guys behind him do actually manage to sneak past, because with their 3-second time penalties, that's going to promote Antonio back up to P4, as well as Owen gets a big snap on the exit of Luffield. Just about manages to keep hold of the car, but he's going to come under pressure here from Kevin, who's going to go around the outside before they get to Cops. So no need to go side by side through the quick right-hander. And that's going to promote the AlphaTauri up to P7. And he's going to benefit from those penalties for the guys in front as well. But checking in with our front 2, those tyres from Carroll have started to be a little bit more square than they are round. And Johnny's medium's starting to come into their own now as the gap has closed to under a second. If Johnny can keep this here as they flick through Vale and Club and onto the Hamilton Straight, if he can maintain this gap under a second through Abbey and Farm, he's going to get DRS down the Wellington Straight, which is going to plant him right on the gearbox of that Mercedes and allow him to possibly take the win here and take pole position for the feature race. We've got a yellow flag, and that's a spin from the area of Dino through Club Corner, which is unfortunately going to drop him down to P10, which after his penalties is going to be more like around about P14. So unfortunate there for the AlphaTauri driver. But Johnny's just 6/10 away from Carroll at the front. He's closing in, breathing down his neck, playing the Jaws theme into that Mercedes cockpit. And he's going to have much better tyres at this stage of the race. They're going to be in much fresher condition. We'll be looking to see if he can make a move. Carroll's probably going to lose time in Max and Beckett. He's going to lose it anywhere with those wearing tyres. And he's had to spend quite a bit of his battery just to try and keep Johnny at arm's length, and it's not quite worked. So Carroll's going to have a slight battery advantage over Johnny, but it's significantly less than it was. And Johnny, with that DRS, is going to have a big straight line speed advantage as they run down the hangar straight, braking 200 miles an hour, whereas Carroll just around about 190. So there's a big difference there in the top end with that rear wing flap open on Johnny's McLaren. But Carroll's managing to fend him off, keeping about 6/10 away, and there's only going to be one more lap. As soon as we begin, the sprint begins to finish. So just one lap to go, one more circuit for Johnny to possibly make a move. Matthias is very safe in P3. He's dropped about 6 seconds off this front 2. He's managed to build 3 seconds on Antonio at the same time. So he's going to be very safe in P3, and he's going to maintain that 2-3 at the worst for McLaren. Johnny will be hoping to improve that to a 1-3 if he can somehow find a way past Carroll, as Jelly picks up 3 seconds as well, so that's going to drop him down from 11th place. And we might see Alfie starting inside the top 10 here, which is going to be quite a turn up. Matthias has gone around! Just as I spoke about being safe in P3, he's had a spin coming through the loop, and that's going to drop him down to P8, and that's very unfortunate for the McLaren driver, as he may actually have had some internet problems because it's just disconnected him, and he's popped up saying he's online on my Steam. So if it's internet based, that is very unfortunate indeed. But back to the front 2 as they run through Maggots and Beckett's for the final time here in the sprint. Johnny's 4/10 behind Carroll, and he's going to spend every last bit of his battery. Carroll's already tapped, and here comes Johnny. The Norwegian driver's going to try it down the inside into Stowe. He has a tighter line, and they're going to be side by side for the run into Vale. Maybe a slight bit of contact. Maybe not quite left enough space on the outside there, Carroll, but he's going to brake late. And they're going to go side by side through Vale and into Club. Johnny's just going to sneak ahead, and he's going to take the maximum 8 points and pole position for the feature race as he wins the first F1 sprint in GRS F1. Mitch is going to come home and take 3rd place with Antonio 4th, but that 3-second penalty for Mitch is going to drop him back down to P4. So Antonio takes P3. Mitch clears Kevin with that penalty by just 15 thousandths of a second. So Kevin's going to be P5 in his first race after promotion. Nitsan Ahana in the Aston Martin very quietly, very carefully made his way up into P6. So a good result, 3 points and a decent starting position there for the Aston Martin driver. Matthias unfortunately drops down to P7 after his spin. And after his penalty, Owen takes P8. Whew. Shall we do it all again, but like 3 times as long? So 8 points for Johnny, manages to get Carroll on that last lap. Just a 1/10 of a second. That soft tyre strategy, not quite the best one. And Johnny made advantage of those medium tyres. So outside of the points, Owen takes that final point with P8. Outside of the points, we have Anson Wong in the second Aston Martin and Uros Lazek with a great drive from 19th up to 10th in the space of 9 laps. He's going to start the feature race 10th. Can he go up 9 places again and take the win? We'll have to wait and see. Alfie Harvey is going to take P11 alongside last year's champion Jelly Giesink in P12. Luke Mills and Dino Pushkadia are going to be 13th and 14th after Dino's penalty for track limits drops him below the Mercedes driver. Hugo Nelson and Jacob Gutcher on the 8th row, with Will Coates and Jan Nadir on the 9th row, and Yari Priem and, unfortunately with a DNF, Evan Bowers are going to start 19th and 20th. But you saw how much things can change in the space of 9 laps. Let's see how much they change in the space of 26. Blue skies at Silverstone for the feature race. So we may see rain, we may not. I would never ever write it out in a British Grand Prix. We may not see rain until lap 23, and then the track could be flooded by lap 24. That is entirely possible and actually kind of likely sometimes. Will be interesting if we do get some weather. as it tends to be, especially with changeable conditions and with a wet qualifying as well. So I wonder if anybody was running a slightly more beneficial to the wet setup, and if we are going to see some rain here. But lights on again for the second time tonight. We have a McLaren and a Mercedes on the front row, this time positioned reversed. Johnny gets a decent start, and he is going to lead them into turn 1. But we've got side by side between Mitchell and Antonio behind. They're continuing their fight from the sprint. And Carroll's going to have a go at Johnny here, possibly into Village. Johnny's going to run it wide around the outside, take a tight line into the loop, and just about hold on. But Carroll's going to have better traction driving around the outside. They're going to go side by side through Aintree and down the Wellington Straight. Is Johnny going to be able to get it down the inside, or does Carroll just have too much straight line speed? Too much straight line speed in the Mercedes. But this fight's not over yet. Johnny's going to get another slipstream all the way down the old pit straight and into Copse. And can he make a move? But Carroll just gets a great drive through Luffield and manages to build that lead out to about half a second already. Johnny's going to slot into the slipstream, but it's not close enough to make a move into the right-hander. As we've got some positions moving around at the back. Owens dropped down to P13 already. Luke's already up into the points, up into P10. So a great start from both Mercedes drivers. Carroll jumping up to first place, and Luke making his way into the points-paying positions already on this first lap of 26. Down the hanger straight they all come now. Carroll leads Johnny from Mitchell, then Antonio. Nitsanahana up to 5th place now in the Aston Martin, having a great quiet race. And we've got Kevin and Matthias going side by side behind the McLaren driver on a recovery after his spin in the sprint. And Kevin, just being promoted from PC2, is not going to let this go without a fight, but he might have to now. Matthias makes his way up into P6, but they've already dropped more than a second behind this front 5. So that's a gap they're going to need to bridge before DRS opens next time around. And we've already got a retirement, and that's Jacob Gutcher in the Ferrari. And no safety car or VSC though, so we're going to continue on. As Yari Priem manages to get down the inside of Anson Wong, takes P8 in the Alpine. And that's going to be a pretty good start there for the Alpine driver as well. As he's up into 8th place, so that's going to be 4 points if he can maintain it there. Maybe he can find some more places. We are going to have a big DRS train back from Matthias right now, unless he can find a bit more pace and get onto this front 4 group. As, oh no, Kevin's gone around. Having just been promoted, Kevin unfortunately has spun in the AlphaTauri going through Luffield, and he's going to lose out to several drivers, including his teammate Dino sneaks through there. That drops Kevin, unfortunately, all the way down to 16th place. So not a great start from the AlphaTauri driver after what was a very strong sprint race. But this front 5 now, we're all going to be sat happily within DRS. Once it opens next time round, Matthias is just sneaking to get on the end. Spending a little bit of resources, a little bit of battery, trying to get within that 1 second window. He's just hovering around outside it. First time we'll get DRS will be down the Wellington Straight next time round. And can the McLaren driver bridge that couple of tenths he needs through the flicks here of Sector 1, as Carroll leads them round with a new fastest lap at the end of lap 2. And there is the notification from race control. The DRS is open, so this front 5, apart from Carroll, of course, are all going to get that rear wing open this time down the Wellington Straight, as Anson's gone round in the second Aston Martin. Unfortunately, that's going to drop him down to P16 and promotes Luke, Owen and Jelly up a place into 8th, 9th and 10th respectively. But they're 2 seconds off Yari up in front, so those 3 guys need to get a bit of a move on to not get kind of ditched by these guys with the DRS. Matthias not quite close enough to get the DRS, and Nitson's actually dropped out as well in the Aston Martin, just hovering around that 1 second, losing a little bit of time down the straight, so running possibly a higher downforce setup, or he's just spent too much battery early on and can't afford to use any more right now. So Carroll, Johnny, Mitchell and Antonio are going to take off at the front. 4 different teams, all separated by under 2 seconds as we come down the hangar straight with DRS for the first time. And we've got a spin at the back, and that is the second Williams of Jan Nadir, losing it on the exit of Luffield. That does seem to be the focal point for most people with their spinning today. So definitely a corner to keep an eye on throughout this race. As the front 4 flick through Club Corner and down the Hamilton Straight once again. Just half a second between the front 2. Michio further 7 tenths back and Antonio 7 tenths back from that. It's out of the DRS now to a gap of 1.6 seconds in the Aston Martin. Still having a pretty good race if he can maintain this, but Matthias is starting to close in. And he might have just sneaked into the DRS there as they drop down into Village. Through the loop they go, and then into Aintree, and then that's where the DRS opens. The detection's just before Village, just turned 3, and there is the rear wing opening on the McLaren driver. So he is going to now start to close in on the Aston Martin in front of him. Hopefully make a move for P5, and he's bringing Jari Priem, the Alpine driver, with him. So these 2 now 3 seconds ahead of Luke Jelly behind them are going to be looking to possibly work together to overcome Nitson, and then all 3 of them might work together to drag themselves towards this front 4, who might start fighting and getting a little bit testy. It's easy to lose time here if you start trying to go side by side through places like Maggots and Beckett's and Cops. So that's what these guys here will be hoping, that those in front do start to fight, go side by side, and they can gain some time on them. Carroll's starting to pull away slightly from Johnny, but Johnny's going to happily sit within the DRS. And that's just going to drag him closer down the Hangar Straight and down the Wellington Straight. Gap at the front around about 9 tenths now, as Carroll sets a new fastest lap, so spending some of his battery and a little bit extra tyre wear possibly, just to try and get out of the DRS range of Johnny. If he can manage that, then Johnny's going to be a little bit exposed, and we've got a spinner, and that's Antonio. So the front 4 becomes a front 3, as the Ferrari has unfortunately lost it. As he ran through Farm, which is a slightly strange place to spin. And he may come under a bit of pressure here from Luke. He's 2 seconds behind Nitson, Matthias and Jari, and might come under pressure from the second Mercedes if Luke can just gain that little bit of time. But Luke and Jelly are going to go side by side here, and Jelly's going to get down the inside for Brooklands. Luke's going to look at a cutback, but Jelly's just carried too much speed through there, and there's nowhere for Luke to place his Mercedes, as he's going to have to follow the Red Bull through Luffield now. Are we going to see a recreation of last year's Silverstone, or is Luke a little bit smarter than trying to go for a move here? He's happy to sit behind. He's on the hard tyres, so he won't be pressing all that hard to try and take a place off of Jelly, who is on the medium, so we'll have to pit a little earlier. As Luke drops down to 9th, but he's already gained some places here on the sprint, as Johnny is overtaking Carroll at the front with the DRS. So I wonder if Carroll made a mistake, because that gap was quite significant, but Johnny's managed to make a move with the DRS down the Hangar Straight, and it takes the lead for McLaren. So it's happened after 5 laps this time. It was 9 last time. Can Carroll come back at Johnny? He had no time to do so last time, as Nitson's unfortunately spun. So that second group of 3 with Matthias and Jari is now going to become a group of 2 instead. And first man in the pits is going to be Nitson, so I wonder if he got front wing damage when he spun. But if he goes on the hard tyres, you can get to the end on 20 laps of hard tyres, so it's not going to be the worst pit stop in the world. He's not going to have to 2-stop here. which is a death sentence essentially at Silverstone with how long and slow the pit lane is. This front three now have a 5-second lead over Matthias and Jari behind. So unless anything crazy happens in terms of spinning and safety cars, this is and weather, this is looking like your podium is going to be sorted with Johnny, Carroll and Mitchell. And the difference is just going to be how exactly they line up on this, as Mitchell goes very wide at Cops there in the background. And well, that's going to be a little bit problematic if he keeps doing that, because even though the game doesn't necessarily give you a warning for that, it is something that other drivers can report and will be added on to your post-race warnings and possibly incur you some penalties, even if you don't pick any up for track limits yourself. As they come round the Vale Club now just to finish lap 6, let's run through the whole order. So, leading the race currently, Jonathan Foss in the McLaren by 0.4 of a second from Karol Wodzinski in the Mercedes. Mitja Merckx runs P3 for Williams, and then a 5-second gap back to Matthias Bosch, the second McLaren, and Jari PM on debut for Alpine. Those two slightly ahead, slightly out of the DRS range of Antonio Cortez behind in the Ferrari after an earlier spin. Bit of a recovery, and they're chased by last year's champion Jelle Giesing and, well, league owner and former championship leader I've been notified of, Luke Mills, currently in P8. Owen Heinen, 3.6 seconds back from them is Owen Heinen. And in the Alfa Romeo after a great start and unfortunately an earlier spin. So a bit of a recovery drive there from the Alfa Romeo driver as well. Chased by Uros Lazar on debut for Haas. Just outside the points then we see the AlphaTauri of Dino Puchkadia, the Haas of Evan Bowers up from the back, up into P12, so he's having a great race so far, but has picked up the only 3-second time penalty of the race so far. P13 is Kevin Kovacs' second AlphaTauri, and PCF2 driver reserving in for Alpine, Hugo Nelson, runs P14. Will in the second Red Bull is P15, currently 2.5 seconds off the back of Hugo. And Alfie's 4 seconds further back in P16, and then bringing up the rear currently we have the two Aston Martin drivers. Anson Wong, after an earlier spin, or possibly a couple of spins, is P17, just looking to get on the back of Alfie and make a move with the DRS if he can. And Nitsuna Hana runs 18th and dead last, but he has made a pit stop, which no one else has made, and gone on to the hard tyres, so he will be looking to go to the end from here. So after all that, let's go back and check out what the front guys are doing, because it basically took a lap to do that. And they are running through Sector 1, gap still half a second from Johnny to Carroll, and then 7/8 tenths back to Mitja, and then a 5-second gap back to Matthias and Jari, who's going to take a look and see if he can make a move here, I think, down the Wellington Straight. We're taking a slightly different line through the loop, shows the nose on the run down into Brooklands, chooses not to dive it down the inside. Think it's a bit better of making that move. I think these guys would be better served just working together, making sure they stay away from Antonio, and hopefully gaining on this front three, if at all possible. Maybe they will have to wait until the front three fight, or maybe they can just make a move. In terms of pace, these guys could have been saving some tyre, saving some battery, and maybe they can find that little bit of extra pace they're going to need to close in on the front guys. And so Matthias takes quite a lot of sausage curb on the way into Magnus and Beckett and almost lost the rear of the car completely. Just about manages to keep a hold of it as they tear down the hangar straight, and now Jari's going to go for the move, and he is going to take over 4th place and leading this little train. Quite a smart place to make the overtake, didn't cost them any time to Antonio behind. Going to allow the Alpine to lead them through around the Vale and Club Complex and down the Hamilton Straight as they begin lap 9 of 26. So in the sprint, this would have been the last lap, but we've got another 17 to go after this, just for all of the strategies and the such to unfold. Of course, no pit stops required within the sprint race, but you do have to make a stop here in the feature race. And speaking of that, we have the second Aston Martin in of Anson from 17th place. So he actually started on the soft tyres. That explains a lot. So yeah, so he'll be pitting onto some hards going to the end. And that is going to be the Aston Martin pit guys' job done, as we've had a spinner at the front, and that's Jari. Jari's unfortunately gone round. That's going to drop him down to P8 behind Luke and Yelly. So that is very unfortunate for the Alpine driver, having just made the move for P4. He's now going to be all the way down in P8. So unfortunate there for the Alpine driver. We'll be looking to maybe make a bit of a recovery if he can. Closed back in with the guys up ahead of him, which is Jelly and Luke as they are flicking through Biggets and Beckett's, and Owen picks up a 3-second time penalty down in P9. So seems to like his penalties, does Owen here at Silverstone. No, he managed to get one in the sprint, and he's managed to pick up another one here. As Carroll and Mitcher have managed to overtake Johnny at the front. Johnny's down to 3rd place, so he's been mugged somewhere with the DRS, or he's made a small mistake. But he's managed to stay in touch with these guys. Just 5 tenths separating each of them now. So I'm not entirely sure what happened with Johnny. Whether he had a big snap of oversteer or maybe a half spin. But he has managed to stay within the DRS range, so he's still going to be in this fight for the lead. Not losing multiple places like we've seen drivers do. So McLaren still in with a chance of winning here, as they did in the sprint. And helping out with their fight for the constructors with Mercedes, as Luke needs to gain some places if he wants to outscore Matthias. Quite a few little groups just beginning to open up now. Antonio's trying to get on the back of Matthias and make that a group of 2 for 4th and 5th. Obviously this group of 3 at the front, group of 2 with Yelly and Luke. Yari's kind of on his own now after his spin, and he's kind of the only person that is. Owen, Dino and Uros are their own little group, and not too far behind them you've got Evan and Kevin. We're going to be looking to get on the back of that and make a little group of 5 there towards the bottom end of the points. As Mitch is in. Mitch is in the pits, so one of our first leader to dive in. That's pretty early, lap 10, to get off those medium tyres. Williams drivers coming in, and it will be going onto the hards, going to the end of the race. So this lap is all important here for Johnny and Carroll. Johnny especially, he needs to make sure he stays within the DRS range of Carroll to not lose out to Mitchell. It'll be interesting to see where Mitchell comes out and if he's going to hit any traffic. We've also got the Haas of Uros Lazic in as well. So first of our scheduled pit stops coming in here on lap 10. Will Carroll and Johnny go long here and try and get that higher delta towards the end of the race? Or are they going to pit the very next lap to cover off any undercut Mitchell could possibly get? It's going to take a while for him to get those hard tyres up to temperature. They're pretty terrible when you come out of the pits, as he's going to come under pressure from Hugo as he's flicking through the loop. But should just about maintain that position. Although a bit of a fight on the rear end. So it's going to be, well, tricky to get these up to temperature. Normally takes a lap, maybe a lap and a half. And Carroll and Johnny are going to be going much faster right now. However, once they are up to temperature, the pressure tyres should give Mitchell a slight pace advantage. So it's whenever Carroll and Johnny choose to take the plunge and come in themselves, both on the medium tyres as well. So they're going to have to go through this heating up phase of the hards, and they both choose to continue for at least one more lap. Neither of them coming in here on lap 11. Matthias and Antonio also staying out. So quite a different kind of pit strategy idea from Mitchell and Uros, going in a lot earlier than most drivers. And this is when I expected to see the first of our pit stops at lap 12. The hards are not the best. They're okay. They don't really lose any pace, but they're not particularly quick. As we've got a yellow flag, and that's a spinning AlphaTauri of Dino again. As he's just about recovering it through club corner. But that's going to lose him some places. And he's going to get mugged, I think, by Mitchell here. He's not. Dino's smart enough just to let Mitchell go and not hold up a pitted leader just after he's spun. So that's going to get Mitchell back up into P12. But he's still not going to get any DRS to help him out with the pace on these hard tyres, although they should be up to temperature now and working pretty well. As Johnny almost runs wide through Cops. But he's sticking on the back of Carroll, so managed to get this gap down to 3/10. I feel like Johnny might be pushing here, because he's getting closer and closer as they run through Maggots and Beckett's. Maybe he saved a little bit more battery and a little bit more tyre, and might be choosing to dive into the pits this lap. I think Johnny might be coming in this time around, or he's just found some mystical, magical pace from somewhere. We know the Norwegian driver is fast, but he's generally not this much quicker than Carroll. And Carroll thought about coming in, and Johnny does. I think Carroll was sort of trying to fake Johnny out that he was going to pit, try and get Johnny to stay out. Johnny is in. So will he get ahead of Mitchell, or will the Williams driver manage to make that undercut work, which is notoriously difficult to do on the hard tyres? Antonio's in as well, along with Jelly and Yari. So a few drivers in and pitting. Luke, of course, carries on those hard tyres, as does Matthias. And Carroll's still out on the mediums, so he's going to have a pace advantage on the hard tyres when he chooses to pit. Possibly next time round, if he was faking Johnny, or maybe he just has magical tyre wear and he's going to go into some softs. He will have a fresh set, considering we had a wet qualifying. Ordinarily, you would use your race set of softs in the sprint race, if you chose to run them, which Carroll did. But with having a wet qualifying, he's got all of those backed sets of softs that were never needed for that qualifying session. As we've got, is that Yari, I think? Having a bit of a moment on the way out of the pits with the cold, hard tyres, which is not unexpected. And Mitch has managed to jump Johnny. So Mitch has just about cleared the McLaren driver. Johnny, with those cold tyres, having a bit of a problem, I think, through that Sector 1. And just difficult to get the power down, get the traction on. And that is going to give Mitch that that undercut, and allow him to retain net P2. We'll have to see where Carroll filters out when he does choose to pit, but Carroll's going to carry on for yet another lap, along with Matthias and Luke on those hard tyres. Matthias and Luke were a little further back off this front three, but they're going to have the medium tyre pace advantage towards the end of the race, and they may even try some softs. They both ran mediums within the sprint race, so they both have a set of soft tyres. Should be a brand new set that they could use here. As Will's in the Red Bull and gets a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane for his troubles. So unfortunate for the Red Bull driver, but he's going to get off those tyres. He unfortunately missed quali, so he's having a pretty good race anyway between the sprint and the race, running up there in the points ahead of some pretty quick drivers. So good run so far for Will, and of course didn't have that warm-up part of the qualifying session. But Carroll, Matthias and Luke carrying on at the front. Big gaps at the front, but it's all about the lap times they're putting in. They're essentially on a time trial right now, racing against the likes of Mitchell and Jelly, who they were racing with and have already pit. So it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain a decent gap back to the guys they were fighting. You would expect Jelly to be ahead of Luke when Luke does pit, with him being on that alternate strategy after they were essentially next to each other when Jelly pit. But then Luke's obviously going to have that tyre advantage later on, and we'll be looking to come back at the Red Bull driver and make a position there for Mercedes. And of course, if there is a safety car or VSC while these guys are still running out on their tyres, they're slowly dying tyres, but they're still functional and still round tyres. They are going to benefit from the reduced delta of the pits, especially with it being such a long and slow pit lane here at Silverstone. The delta is kind of massive, as Evans in the Haas as well. So that kind of clears him out of Mitch's way quite nicely. Mitch is going to be able to carry on unimpeded and try and jump Carroll if he can. I feel like Carroll would have already pit if he wasn't going to try and go on softs, as Hugo's crashed. Is that in the pit lane? Please tell me that's not in the pit lane, Hugo. Oh no, he's retired in the pits. That's okay. That's my truth. No, Hugo unfortunately retiring in the pits, so I'm sure if he needs to go somewhere or if he has But with all these pit stops, that's going to promote Kevin up into P2. He's going to be 24 seconds off the lead. But he is currently running just ahead of Mitchell and Johnny. So that's around about where the delta is. It's about 29 seconds here around Silverstone. And Mitch is currently 26 seconds behind Carroll. So he's managed to build 3 seconds out, and that's not factoring in Carroll having to do a lap on cold tyres once he does come out of the pits. So then we have Mitchell and Johnny behind Kevin there in P3 and P4. Matthias P5 in the second. McLaren just coming out of the pits. 5 seconds back from these two, so he hasn't lost any time running on those hards, and hopefully he'll have a bit of a pace advantage here if he can really make the most of it. P6 for Alfie Harvey, currently in the Alfa Romeo, having a storming race, just staying out of trouble. Trying to stay away from the quick guys. He hasn't pit yet, so expect him to drop down a few places when he does have to dive into the lane. But as of right now, having a pretty strong race for Alfa Romeo. Behind him is Luke, who has managed to get the overcut on Jelly and managed to make the place on that Red Bull driver as Johnny's challenging Mitchell. They're in side by side into the Vale chicane. Johnny's going to hang it on around the outside. Mitchell just about leaves him space and then takes the inside line for Club. He's going to maintain P3. These two closing in on Kevin at quite a rate. Kevin on those old tyres. But he's not going to be able to defend this for too long, I don't think, on those old hards against these two on fresh hards. But they are going to start just losing time fighting each other, while also having Kevin in front of them, though. He is going to give Mitch a DRS here, I think. Yeah, the rear wing open there on the Williams, which is going to drag Mitchell along away from Johnny and that little bit closer to Carroll, who is still going on his medium tyres here on lap 17. This has to be a medium soft strategy, but he's just getting understeer for days through Maggots and Beckett's. Just about managed to keep it on the track. We've got a spinning Ferrari. That's Antonio, unfortunately, in Sector 1. Just trying to recover the car. I think he's done something weird with his tyres because he's just had to do about 4 donuts to get it facing the right way again. But he's managed to do so eventually and then retires the car. So as Carroll's in from the lead. On lap 17, this has to be soft. There's no way you take the lead of the race by around about 8 seconds, I think, here, as Kevin's going to dive in off those hards. So Carroll's managed to do a strategy on mediums that most people would need the hards for, as he's already changed his tyres and he is on, you see, those shiny red walled softs. As a 3-second time penalty there for Nitson. So Carroll's going to be P4 as he comes out of the pits. He's lost so much time. He's going to be behind Matthias as well. As Nitson in the Aston Martin has unfortunately retired after crashing in Maggots and Beckett's by the looks. Dot is moving again, so possibly just picked up some damage there from the curbs. Carroll comes out 6 seconds off the back of Matthias, so he's going to be about 11 seconds off the lead. Can he find 11 seconds in 8 laps with tyres that are not going to be fresh forever? But they are already up to temperature. He's already got 90-degree tyres from the info on his steering wheel. So he is going to have some serious pace under him in that Silver Arrow. And will take off after both McLarens and the Williams down the road. Mitchell still leads Johnny by just 0.6 of a second, and Matthias is kind of pulling in on these guys. They must have been fighting pretty heftily. Matthias, with those medium tyres as well, is just 3.2 back from them now, which up to 3.1 just on the exit of Chapel alone. So taking some big chunks out of them, but the question is, can he get to them before the end of the race, and will Carroll get to him first? Carroll's going to be absolutely flying on those soft tyres. For the first 3 or 4 laps at least, I would expect him to take at least a second a lap out of the front 3. But it's whether he can keep them alive long enough to actually make moves when he arrives. As yet another 3-second time penalty for Dino, but the lead driver with any time penalties is Alfie, so fortunately they're not going to have any impact on the result of the race. For the major points scoring positions, at least. We never want a win decided on penalties. That always feels a little bit anticlimactic. As Johnny's getting sort of closer to Mitchell with the DRS, but then sort of loses a little bit of time here, and they're in the corners. Matthias just 3 seconds back, so he's gaining gradually, but not really fast enough to arrive with these guys before the end of the race. And Carroll has already taken a second out of Matthias as he runs down the old pit straight and into Copse Corner. On those soft tyres, you can just take such a tighter line and carry so much more speed through there. You can just gain 2/10 to Copse alone. And you keep doing that consistently through several corners. Maggots and Beckett should be a big time delta when he gets it absolutely perfect. And there is another couple of tenths there through Maggots and Beckett for the gain on Matthias. But Matthias, through that complex, gained 2/10 on the front 2 as well. So they might all land together here when we get to the final lap. If Matthias can keep this pace up, those mediums are going to hang on pretty well. Carroll's softs are going to die off fairly quickly, so he kind of needs to be getting on the back of Matthias as soon as humanly possible. As there is a new fastest lap there for the Silver Arrow with a 28.7, and Alfie's in. So Alfie, bored of running high up in the points, is going to come in, get off those hard tyres, and put some softs on for the end and have some fun. So speaking of fun, back at the front, Johnny 8/10 back from Mitchell. So Mitchell's actually managing to pull away a little bit despite Johnny having that DRS advantage. And Matthias just 2.3. Matthias seems to gain a huge amount of time in Sector 1. And Carroll just 4.4 behind Matthias. So Carroll's very gradually reeling Matthias in, while Matthias is just taking huge chunks out of the front two. Mostly in Sector 1. And is coming at some pace to get on the back of his teammates. 6 laps to go after this one, and just 2.1 the gap, so he only needs to find about a second and he's going to get the DRS and latch on to this front two with the tyre advantage of the mediums. But it's down around about 30% of his ERS, so he's spending quite a lot to get on terms with these guys. Johnny sat quite a lot of battery power in his McLaren, and Mitchell as well. I think they're probably going to just sort of sit on it and save it a little bit for if and when Carroll arrives. Because when he arrives, it's going to be at speed. And Carroll's managing to put some pretty good laps together here without spending too much batteries. So he's not going to be at too much of a disadvantage when he does arrive, but it's all going to depend on what kind of state his tyres are in. Luke's having a pretty good race, though, currently running P5. It seems the hard-medium strategy that Matthias and Luke have done was the best one to do. Carroll's trying something a little different, a little audacious, trying to go medium soft. Tyre wear really kind of too high to really do that. But Carroll here is trying to make it work. They are very quick if you can pull them off, but it's a little bit sketch to try and do so. There's some fighting going on a little bit further back. I think we'll leave Mitchell and Johnny a little bit for now, as they're kind of going to hold station a bit until Matthias and Carroll arrive, I feel. So we've got Owen and Dino fighting down in 12th and 13th, the Alfa Tauri and Alfa Romeo. So we get to find out who is the true alpha amongst these two. As Dino is going to have the DRS on Owen. They both have penalties, so this should get decided on track, which is always nice to see. Yeah, they both have 3 seconds, so this is a fight for pride over P12. As, well, they're going pretty well. They're just going to have to hope for something to unfold in front of them. Which is hopefully going to benefit them if people, die and stuff. Dino's actually gained a place off the start, was in P14 after the sprint race. Owen's dropped 4 places, though, after not a great start and having a spin. So he'll be hoping to keep a hold of his medium tyres against Dino's hards, which are going to get better as the race goes on, and keep him at arm's length, just half a second behind him for now as they run through Stowe. Back to the front as they're just running through Brooklands and Luffield. Half a second the gap between Mitchell and Johnny. Matthias now just a second and a half away, so he's just half a second away from getting that rear wing open. And Carroll just 2.8 back from Matthias. So he's still closing on the soft tyres, but I think the rate he's closing at has slowed down dramatically. Although he still pulled 9 seconds to Luke. And Luke was kind of right behind him when he came out of the pit, so it sort of shows just how quick those soft tyres are when they're brand new. But they very, very quickly become second-hand. I think Carroll's starting to feel some of the adverse effects of that tyre wear, as he's having to spend a little bit of battery to try and get closer to Matthias. But I just don't think he's going to have the tyre life to really get up to these guys and still have anything left in the tank to really challenge with. He does gain some time through Stowe. Gap to Matthias down to 2.3, but then it kind of builds up again for the run through the final corners. But he gets a pretty good drive through Club, and through Sector 1, they're still keeping him like very tight lines, very easily on track, but not so much faster than Matthias, who is still gaining in on these front two. So I think if Carroll was just... Oh, we've got a spinner. That's Mitcher. Mitcher's gone round. So that is going to promote McLaren up to a 1-2. I'm not sure if there was contact with Johnny. I don't think so. Johnny still seems to be about half a second back. I think Mitch has just lost the rear on the exit of the loop. That's going to drop him down to P4. So now Matthias has a definite target in sight of his teammate. 1.3 seconds down the road, up the road, I guess, as they run through Copse for the 23rd of 26 times. So just 3 laps to go after this one. And Matthias is growing ever closer to his teammate. 1.2 the gap, so he's going to be outside DRS here for the run down the Hanger Straight. But Johnny doesn't have it anymore. Johnny was getting that rear wing open from being behind Mitcher. Matthias has spent all of his battery, though, trying to close this gap in. Maybe slightly to protect himself from Carroll more than to have a go at Johnny specifically. But if he can just sneak into the DRS, although I can't imagine Johnny's going to be willing to slow down for him, then it's definitely going to help McLaren secure a, I wouldn't say an unlikely 1-2, I would say an unlikely 1-2 after Matthias' spin at the end of the sprint race relegated him down into the bottom rungs of the top 10. Managed to have a good race and fight his way back up to P2, doing what in my opinion is the superior strategy of hard to medium. Cold hards when you come out of the pits are just kind of awful and you lose so much time on the outlap. Carroll tried something different, but so far it's not worked. And his tyres are just going to get worse and worse as this race goes on. So I think if he hadn't closed by now, he's not going to. That gap's kind of hanging about around 2.2, 2.3, keeping pace with Matthias. He does seem to have a bit of a pace advantage over Johnny. But Matthias just definitely has the measure of him on those medium tyres that are only 2 laps older. But are going to maintain their pace significantly better. As Owens unfortunately retired in the pit, so that ends his fight there with Dino. As we've got quite a lot of penalties at the back, but the only one nearing the front with any is Mitcher, who unfortunately picked up 3 seconds on that last lap, on that last time round. But he seems to have a big enough gap back to Luke that it's not going to affect the finishing positions. Matthias just 0.6 back from Johnny at the front. So will we see some team orders from McLaren, or are they going to let their drivers fight? I would like to see them fight, however, that is potentially going to open them up to Carroll a little bit, who's now started losing time, so I think he has made the wrong choice. Trying a medium-soft strategy, which is definitely different, but it's not quite worked out for him. Is it Alfie? Or is that AI Owen? AI Owen has decided to drive back out of the pits after retiring. And kind of just park himself on the track. And that's given Matthias the lead over Johnny. I'm not sure if Johnny had a bit of a mistake, maybe got held up by that AI car driving out of the pits. But either way, Matthias has taken the lead of the race. Maybe possibly been some team orders in there. But Johnny should just have about enough pace to stay away from Carroll. 2.3 the gap. And Matthias has taken off. He's 1.7 clear of Johnny already. In the McLaren. 1-2 swapping positions. Yeah, I think Johnny might have made a mistake. I don't think it is team orders because now he started spending his battery to try and catch up again. So he may have had a bit of a moment, managed to more or less catch it, but did lose a place to his teammate. But these two are going to pull away from Carroll, get that gap back out to 3 seconds. Down to the Mercedes driver in 3rd place, who's tried something different today. It didn't quite come off. But it is going to net him a P3, although we will be disappointed with that after taking pole position, dropping down to P2 in the F1 sprint. And then, unless there's some crazy final lap shenanigans going on with spins or potentially weather, but I can't see it rolling in that fast, he is going to drop down 1 more place and take P3 in this race. All that remains to be solved really at the front is whether Johnny can get on the back of Matthias, but I don't think he's going to have the pace to gain the half second he needs just to get in the DRS in time for the Hanger Straight. And even if he does, he's not going to have enough battery, I don't think, in order to make a move through the Hanger Straight. Johnny spent most of it just trying to get back on terms with his Dutch teammate, who has had a pretty good recovery drive from 7th on the grid after the sprint, has managed to get his way into the lead of the race, and is going to lead home a McLaren 1-2. Mitch is going to be P4 pretty solidly. He's just 2 seconds behind Carroll now, but I don't think he's going to have enough to catch in the 3 corners pretty much that they have left. Just Maggots and Beckett's Stowe and then Vale for them to negotiate. Although Mitch is gaining quite a lot through Maggots and Beckett's, I don't think he's going to get close enough to potentially make a move towards the end of the lap. Carroll's softs are just about going to hang on. Luke's going to take P5. Yari's going to take P6 up from the back of the grid. So a great recovery drive from the Alpine up in P6. Started P19. So he's had a good drive there. Last year's champion Yeli's going to come home P7. Didn't have a great sprint. Started in P12. But he is going to pick up a few points here. As Carroll's just going to hold on ahead of Mitchell for the podium places. Luke is going to take P5 for the second Mercedes. So some good points for Mercedes, but they do lose ground to McLaren in that constructors fight. Yari takes P6 on debut for Alpine. Great recovery drive from 19th on the grid. Yelly there with P7. So Euros versus Kevin. Euros makes a move for P8. And it's going to come down to penalties, I think. I'm not sure how these guys are looking on penalties. They're equal at 3 seconds. So it's going to be decided by that move into Stowe on the final lap. Euros takes P8 for Haas. Kevin P9. And thanks to Will's penalty, it's going to be a double points finish for AlphaTauri, with Dino taking the final points ping position in P10. After a good fight with Owen, Dino managed to get P10. Owen retired from the race. Possibly some damage, something of that nature. And chose to kind of bail out on that fight. So, overall results from GRS's first sprint weekend. Matthias Posch takes 27 points, courtesy of a win in the race and 7th in the sprint. Jonathan Voss wins the sprint, and then his second place gives him 26. So, a 53-point haul there for McLaren. Great weekend for them. 23 points for Karol Wodzinski. Second in the sprint, third in the race, and the fastest lap point. 17 for Mitchell Merckx in the Williams. Luke Mills didn't score in the sprint, but gets 10 points from the race. Yari PM, 8 points from the race after not scoring in the sprint. Antonio Cortez gets 6 from that third place sprint finish. Kevin Kovacs on his first race after his promotion, 6 points, along with last year's champion Jeli Giesink with 6 as well. Euros Lazek on debut takes 4 points for the Haas team. Itzan Ahana, 3 for Aston Martin. And Owen Heinen and Dino Pushkadir take a point apiece for Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri. Whew. Can we have 2 commentators when we have sprint races? My voice can't take that. So, well, welcome to Silverstone. It's always like this. The racing is always nuts. DRS is extremely powerful, and our drivers don't make too many mistakes, so any that they do have, any little half spins or anything of that nature, is extremely impactful on the final finishing positions. But that is going to conclude GRS F1 Round 5 from Silverstone, our first sprint race weekend. Next race is Austria, I want to say. I think. Spain? Spain. Ignore me. It's Spain. Next race will be Spain, which will be back to the normal format of short qualifying and a 50% race. There will be another sprint race further down the line in a few weeks' time at Imola. So make sure you check out Spain next week and the remaining races of this season, this titanic duel between McLaren and Mercedes for the drivers and constructors. McLaren took a big jump forward today, so can they keep that momentum going? I've been Zeke, I've been your